Hi, I'm Brother Jake. Now, there are a lot of people out there who say that the rules about what Mormons can eat or drink are weird or sometimes arbitrary, but that's not true at all. Let me explain. But first, you gotta understand why Mormons have rules about that kind of stuff in the first place. You see, way back in 1833, Joseph Smith was running something called the School of the Prophets, where he would get together with some apostles and other dudes and teach them about all the cool God stuff he was learning from being a prophet. And while they were there learning, a lot of the guys were smoking or chewing tobacco. Anyway, eventually Joseph's wife, his first wife, Emma, got so grossed out by having to clean up all the spit and stuff on the floor that she asked him if he was absolutely sure that God didn't have anything to say about that kind of stuff, and it turns out he did. That revelation became section 89 in the Doctrine and Covenants, which we call the Word of Wisdom. Anyway, the Word of Wisdom is a commandment about how to care for our bodies by controlling what we put into them. Well, kind of. I mean, see, the actual text itself doesn't really call it a commandment per se. In fact, it kind of explicitly says that it's not really a commandment, but rather a principle with a promise. But later, some other prophets came along and said it was a commandment, so it's definitely a commandment, even though it says, it's not. The point is that the Word of Wisdom tells us how to be healthy and take care of our bodies by listing out the things that are good and bad for us. So the good things are like eating food that's in season, and eating grains and herbs and fruit, and eating meat sparingly and only in times of cold or winter or famine. But don't get me wrong, it's not like we're supposed to be vegetarian or anything. We're not crazy. That's mostly because they didn't have refrigeration back then or something. That's why it's there. Meat, don't go overboard, but it's fine. It's fine. Meat's fine. Anyway, so those are the, good things or whatever. But the bad things, there are 5 specific things that you should never ever take into your body. They are alcohol. The Word of Wisdom says that inasmuch as any man drinketh wine or strong drink among you, behold, it is not good, and that strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. When you wash yourself with alcohol. Actually, I'm not really sure what that means. That's probably another thing from that time or something. The point is that the Word of Wisdom says you shouldn't drink any alcohol of any kind at all. Well, that's what it means. I mean, sure, the actual text technically says that wine is okay for sacrament and that barley's okay for mild drinks, which kind of sounds like it's giving a pass to alcoholic barley-based beverages like beer. Oh, and, there's quite a bit of documented evidence that Joseph Smith actually continued to drink alcoholic wine after the Word of Wisdom was revealed, up to and including the night before he was killed in Carthage jail, which might kind of make you wonder how seriously the whole no alcohol part was supposed to be taken, but that was just a different time, man. People needed some run out to start living the whole thing by the book. Well, not literally by the book per se, but what the book, meant. So that's why God had some prophets clarify later on that the time was right, that all alcohol was definitely against the Word of Wisdom. And yeah, that time just so happened to coincide with the national temperance movement, which might make it seem like moving to a more stringent observation of the alcohol clause of the Word of Wisdom wasn't so much a product of revelation as it was a reaction to societal changes. But like I said before, that's why prophets are so awesome, because they can tell everyone what earlier prophets meant to say when they were telling everyone what God wanted them to hear, because they were the prophet. So it all works out in the end. Anyway, the second thing you should never ever take in your body is tobacco. According to the Word of Wisdom, tobacco is not for the body, neither for the belly, and is not good for man, but is an herb for bruises and all sick cattle. Okay, that's probably another one of those things from back then. I mean, tobacco's probably good for sick cows or something, but the important part is that we shouldn't take tobacco into our bodies. So that means no smoking tobacco and cigarettes or cigars, and no chewing tobacco, and I guess that's it. This one's pretty straightforward. No tobacco. No tobacco. The third thing is drugs, like illegal drugs or misusing prescription drugs, basically anything that can be habit forming. You see, the Word of Wisdom says, well, actually, the Word of Wisdom doesn't really say anything specifically about this drug stuff, but that's probably, just because they didn't know about illegal drugs or pharmaceuticals in Joseph Smith's day. I mean, they thought tobacco was medicine, for crying out loud. Besides, it's all in the spirit of avoiding stuff that can be bad for you. So yeah, no illegal drugs, no addictive prescription drugs, except under the care of a physician. The last 2 things you shouldn't put into your body are tea and coffee. The Word of Wisdom says, well, see, this one's a little tricky, because here's the deal. The actual Word of Wisdom says that hot drinks are not for the body or the belly, but remember when I talked about how later on some prophets came along and made some clarifications about the Word of Wisdom? See, that's what happened here. So some other prophets came along later and clarified that when the Word of Wisdom says hot drinks, it doesn't mean just all drinks that are, hot. So stuff like hot chocolate or hot water with lemon are fine. It's just coffee and tea. Well, not all tea. Herbal tea is fine, just not black tea or green tea. What? I'm not really sure about green tea. It's a gray area, but definitely not black tea or coffee. And sure, it might seem like an arbitrary application of an intrinsically vague prohibition, but it's still part of the Word of Wisdom. They're still hot drinks, right? I mean, Yeah, so are those ones, but these are different. For one thing, they got a lot of caffeine in them. Not that caffeine is against the word of wisdom per se, because it isn't, since sodas with caffeine are fine, right?
Mormons adhere to a very strict health code.
No alcohol, no tobacco, no coffee, no tea, not even caffeinated soft drinks.
Right.
Oh, come on! Okay, fine. I guess that statements like that, along with the fact that church-owned institutions like BYU continue to refuse to sell or allow the sale of caffeinated sodas on their grounds, could give the impression that Mormons are against caffeine because it's against the word of wisdom, and that's why tea and coffee are on the no-no list. But it's not really about the caffeine. It's just they're hot. I mean, just no tea, no black tea, and no coffee. Okay? Jeez. Anyway, if we live by the word of wisdom, we're promised a lot of super awesome blessings like health in the navel and marrow in the bones, strength in the hidden treasures of knowledge, and we'll be able to run and not be weary and walk and not faint. Doesn't that sound awesome? And the thing is, Joseph was way ahead of his time with a lot of this stuff. Think about it. Back in 1833, people didn't know stuff like tobacco and alcohol was bad for you, but tons of studies now show that they totally are. And that's not just anybody saying that. Those are scientists. That's science. I mean, sure, there are a lot of studies that show that some things against the word of wisdom, like moderate alcohol usage, can actually carry some health benefits. Oh, and, there's not really any robust evidence whatsoever that stuff like coffee and tea are bad for you, but that's just what scientists say. Science is changing all the time. What do they know? The point is that the word of wisdom is super important. That's why when church leaders give you interviews to do stuff like get a temple recommend, which is a piece of paper that lets you go into our super special VIP temples, so you can go to super special VIP heaven or receive the priesthood, which is the authority of God that people, well, just men can get to bless their families and give them legit baptisms and stuff, or even get baptized in the church in the first place. They'll ask you if you keep the whole word of wisdom. Well, I mean, not the whole word of wisdom. See, here's the deal. As you might have guessed by the brief, vague description I gave of the do's of the word of wisdom and the long, specifically itemized description I gave of the don'ts, there are some parts of it that are more emphasized than others. Don't get me wrong, it's all important, but let me put it this way. No one's going to stop you from getting baptized if you eat a pineapple in Michigan in November, or, I don't know, the Baconator for every meal, but they definitely will if you drink coffee. Does that make sense? Now, at this point, some of you might be thinking, but a commandment about physical health where you de-emphasize some aspects of it that have been shown to have health benefits, such as eating less meat, while emphasizing other aspects of it that have no demonstrated health benefits, such as not drinking coffee, makes it seem less like a commandment about physical health and more like a behavioral litmus test. But you're missing the point. The blessings don't come from the stuff you do or don't eat or drink. They come from God. We're blessed because we're obedient. So if God ever said that milk was against the word of wisdom, which he never will, but if he did, we'd be blessed for keeping the commandments. But he never will. But if we did, we'd be blessed. But he won't. So don't worry. Milk's fine. At the end of the day, the word of wisdom helps people avoid dangerous stuff like alcohol and drugs, which can really ruin a person's life through addiction and dangerous side effects. Those things can pose a real danger. So how can prohibiting them be a bad thing? We're just trying to help people avoid things that could be harmful and addictive. Oh, and tea, black tea, and coffee. So you see, not weird or arbitrary at all.